An army of 60,000 divine princes, SagaR himself, SagaRA 3,500 cybernetically enhanced soldiers, Carpathian combat monks of Stone Candle, Mountain Rumble, Swift River, Mountain Temple and Lords of the Height, more than 280,000 regular troops plus local troops, and militia gathered to advance south. All this army moved towards the city an unclean sorcerer. The city turned out to be fortified using Danavian technology, and with the help of unholy witchcraft. Realizing that his capital was under siege, Ialith recalled numerous troops of mutants and robbers from Europe to defend the capital. But before the troops could return, SagaRA had already taken the capital and cut off the head of Ialith, and the mutant troops that arrived were lured to the destroyed capital and blown up along with it. This operation became possible due to the fact that Talazin the prince and Baliatar the prince with their troops went to self-sacrifice restraining the unclean inside the city, so they showed the highest loyalty to the supreme SagaRA prince. By the order of SagaR, Ialith Grad was thrown into hell through the flames, and displayed there on one of the infernal planets. Unclean and evil spirits became the basis of the local form of life there, and the opportunity for other sinners to incarnate there. If a person sins greatly during his lifetime, the holy city and hell can become one of the first stops of a sinner, where all kinds of terrifying creatures will mock him. Talazin the prince and Baliatar the prince were lifted up, and turned into the likeness of sacred warts, and, as perfect warts, they were released into the higher worlds. Before his death, Ialith sent a powerful signal into space, which was responded to by the ship of any Tirit. After the war, victory and self-sacrifice of brave warriors, the SLAVS saw in the sky a huge ship of any Terivs. They landed near the ruins of Ialith city. The weakened troops of the SLAVS fearlessly met the unclean and ordered them to leave. But the unclean began a war against the SLAVS. SagaRA destroyed the ship of any Tirit and its parts were used to strengthen the Rat city. The defeated troops of the already few any Tirit scattered over the land, and many of them later went to the service of the Danav prince. A significant part of any Teriv settled in the former Masvanakta. They were joined not only by the fugitive allies of the sorcerer king Ialith, the cultists of Avarasanatar, the spirits of emptiness, the fugitive allies of Kalhadist, the fugitive allies of Prince Kabedek Ivrit, the ghoul king Hagastus, parts of the fugitive armies of Kabedek, Kajarik, Galjabath, the cities of kings Dod son of Abasanasp grandson of Gahantvira and Nagastus eldest son of Saktivana's grandson Gahantvira, but also 23, fallen Liga who came to avenge Avarasanatar. Shilatai was informed of this and accelerated the preparations of the Order of the Reborn Flame, and the Holy Army for battle. And as soon as he could, he joined the war with the unclean, which lasted 90 years. Janai Garislav's victory over Hagastus is 16 years old. The war with the Danavas was gaining new momentum. Intelligence reported to the capital on extensive military preparations in all the countries of the Danavas or their vassals. The further objectives of the moving armies were obvious. Attacks by the Danavas and their allies have intensified in all border areas. A common threat of enslavement arose, which called for unity even among many degraded peoples. The aggression was increasing and obvious. The war became simply inevitable. In this regard, an order was received to relocate 40 monastic orders to the valley of the Nyas Hasila River, in the Pires. It went from northeast to southwest from Zaragoza near Lisbon. It was necessary to observe the advance of the Danavian armies, to monitor the appearance and progress of foreign banners and military vehicles. These 40 monastic orders formed the Holy Army, the basis of which were the orders of the heirs of the co-founders. Under the control of their lords, Sakraslav led a new order of co-guardians, and ruled the entire army. Hruna led the order of the exterminators of evil. Savarama led the order of the power of creation. Semerglislav led the order of 7,000 lights. Kajrichan led the order of grinders. Smaladriv. The exterminators of evil were followed by the knights of the burning of corpses, the lords of swords, flying mowers, temple guards, guardians of the night, sons of Typhon, funeral guards, silence installers, beating Danavas. The order of the power of creation of Lord Savram was followed by the tormentors of enemies, the order of Prince Yasvatin, hot co-enchanters, tree walkers, singers of co-creation, iron nightingales, bearers of the primordial banner, collectors of jaws, azure sphinxes. The order of 7,000 lights of the glorious Lord Semerglislav was followed by banner breakers, flesh-tearing, trampling cities, time abominations, implacable monks, victors blessed by the sun, eliminators of any evil, cowards. The order of grinders, Smaladri, of the Lord of Kajarichen was followed by angry stormbringers, co-enchanters of heaven, ash lords, dissecators, openers, warriors of the eighth vow, giving redemption, mountain shakers, carrying lightning, and they were accompanied by 2 kosh of ordinary warriors from a little distance. Only the lords but also their disciples were equal in strength to each other. Their ancestors were representatives of noble families, sons of the heavenly lords. At the head of their army were saints selected from among the most devoted. Full of strength and hope they stood on the plain, surrounded by poles on which the banners of the orders waved. Various insignia were on their heads. Some had high eagle wings protecting their eyes, while others had the long horns of a sacred deer that fell to their shoulders. Some had complicated tools that the master gave them on their belts. Others had ritual knives and swords, and others had nothing at all. The lords of Kajarichen had pipes decorated with letters as their only weapons. The best craftsmen of Kajarichen made pipes from corundum for them. The overlords had golden helmets that glittered in the sun. The supreme lords had long sharp spears, and in their hands glittered shields with symbols of strength and invincibility. Thick red marks were embroidered on their white robes with gold and gold embroidery. Their belts and armor were covered with special markings, images of different animals and birds. Their cloaks were decorated. Sacred diamonds hung around their necks. Their necks were decorated with numerous amulets and rings. The lord of the lightning bearers, SagaR, looked like Janai himself. He had a heavy whip in his hand, and a spear of light in his other hand. The 2 sons of the deputy Sankala, on a chariot, carried the helmet of the lord of the iron nightingales Shaknjan, made of the skull of a dragon. Shaknyana controlled the lightning with an invisible beam. Shaknyana earned this power when he walked through the fiery corridor, carrying cherries as an offering to Janai. Siddhaljisvar Koyuran Shatni towered, who killed hundreds of brave warriors with his own hands. The lords of the iron nightingales and the Koyuran monks wore metal signs of great unity, with Mount Visan on their clothes. The eliminators of any evil were also famous for their belligerence, holding weapons in their hands against light and darkness. Many battle symbols were embroidered on their cloaks, a bow with arrows, and shining signs of good and evil. The same could be said about the elders of the chariots. All of their robes had blue stripes on the chest, and white stripes on the back. Their shields were decorated with the coats of arms of SagaR and Janai. The lord of the iron nightingales was accompanied not only by warriors from the 4 corners of the world, but also by 2 women dressed in gray and black. They also wore signs of great unity, with Mount Visan on their chests. 2 huge flaming hammers rose from behind their heads. The lords of the chariots often rode iron horses, which were very fast and extremely hardy. These horses allowed people to quickly overcome the space between the worlds. The iron horses were also driven by 2 warriors dressed in yellow and red. Even the mighty heavenly warriors had fought with them before, and were defeated. It was clear from their clothes and black shields that they were SagaR's assistants. These great warriors usually wore 3 green wreaths on their heads, a sign of eternal youth and eternal power. They themselves often let go of the reins, which embarrassed the other warriors, who were also subordinates of SagaR. But more often than not, the iron horses flew through the sky at the same speed as the chariots, and then returned back. The attendants of the axe and sword in green togas accompanied the lord of the trees. The initiates of the north accompanied him in white capes, and with copper-riveted shields. And finally, the famous flyers on iron birds, led by veterans of 2 great worlds. Among them were residents of different countries and peoples, to whom SagaR gave special assignments. There were flying knights among them, who shared many of his adventures with SagaR, and chroniclers who recorded his visions. There were also many new ministers of SagaR. Many of them did not appear at the great lords for a long time, improving in meditation and combat. It was not gradually that they gained experience and became truly beautiful and powerful, and so won his heart with their exploits. But before they could be honored by SagaR to pay attention to them, they had to go through many trials, show truly supernatural strength and wisdom. Sometimes such ministers died without returning to their homeland, and others became famous. Then SagaR became thoughtful, and his heart suffered from separation from his students. But the next time they returned to him, showing not only the art of wielding weapons, but also their own special vision, amazing in the depth of insight, into the essence of things. Many days and years passed, and one day SagaR himself saw in a dream these preparations for battle. It happened about 6 years ago, and then he was already calm for his people. Then the great battle began. Danavas from long-range guns struck the ranks of the SLAVS, destroying more than 2,000 soldiers and 100 monks from the Guardians of the Night and the Sons of Typhon, wounding 900 funeral guards. The SLAVS retreated, but many dead bodies remained on the plain. Snipers tirelessly shot the retreating ones, and so more than 3,000 soldiers and several hundred monks died. Svyatozar and Donatai were among the dead. The Prince of Danav ordered the warriors to be stunned with thunder weapons. Soon, they were no longer able to fight. The massacre began. The brave Belarad, Orksy, Volkut and many others fell. All of them were killed. Then thousands more soldiers and hundreds of warriors fell under the blows of metal weapons. SagaR himself received many wounds. He saw the death of all his subjects, and no longer knew peace. He became insensitive to pain and weakened by the hour. Therefore, he ordered the priests to gather and spread lightning against the Danavas. And when the lightning began to inflict wounds on the enemy, and then kill, and injure the survivors, the onslaught of the Danavas stopped. All the lords of the orders beat the Danavas, and threw their servants into confusion. But the forces of the spiritual might of the lords of the orders were too great. The SLAVS won, giving the Danavs a terrible lesson by stopping the Danav advance into Europe. This victory entailed unprecedented disasters because the Danavas became more embittered. Then the Danavas began to prepare a second offensive. They made a huge bonfire of gravity and surrounded themselves with the smoke of gravity. So they went on the offensive and the smoke made the SLAVS feel sick. Many of them went mad, and went blind. The Chronicles tell us that the Danavas themselves were very afraid of true fire, so they guessed to replace the fire of gravity with the fire that burned in their underwater plane. It was Niagan who burned every person the Danavas saw after their campaign. What happened to the people who burned alive is not as scary as what the Danavas did by gravity. But Saint SagaR restrained the onslaught of the unclean. All the troubles that the world did not receive were brought down on the Danavas by the fire of great glory of Saint SagaR. There was nothing they could do to escape him. According to the documents, these events are described as follows. The Danavas howled, seeing the horror of the Danavas in their sorrows. And the Danavas fell down, and they tore their hair, and their whole bodies trembled. Great anger and pain took possession of their souls. They were trying to escape from the burning earth. But where did they run to if they were burned by heat and cold all the time? Danavas fell and crashed on the rocks. Another arrow shot from SagaR's bow pierced through them. Soon they all died. Sometimes a source writes that the Danavas tried to grab one of the heavenly stars in order to return to their bright land, but she wouldn't let them in, and then tears flowed down their foreheads.